Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Draft Preview Show, sponsored by NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube TV. I'm Jason Fitz. We're going to be hanging out with you for the next hour, giving you expertise from these two amazing people as we get you ready to dominate your leagues. Of course, he's Andy Behrens. You know, sneaky tall Andy Behrens. I learned that over the course of the week.
Generally.
Sneaky tall, sneaky long wingspan. Is that what we're going to go with? I feel like, what's a measurable? Like 6'6"? I feel like you're 6'6". We're going to make you 6'6".
That's about right. Let's call me 6'6".
I don't think that's accurate. That would make me like 6 foot. And then Tera Roberts joining us. Tera, welcome to the Yahoo family.
You.
It's so awesome that we get to hang out with you.
Thank you. I'm not sneaky tall, sneaky short.
I like to think of it as sneaky, sufficiently average size.
There we go. Yeah.
I don't feel like I'm short. I'm just not nearly as tall as Andy Behrens, right? So here's what we're going to do. Over the course of the next hour, we're going to get you sleepers. We're going to get you fades. We're going to get you superstars. We're going to make roster lineups. We're going to help you figure out how to absolutely dominate your league. And we're going to do it while we have a lot of fun along the way. How do we feel about domination? Tera, you should know this. All right, I should just get this out of the way early. I'm a defending champion, okay? Last year was my first year on FFL. I may or may not have absolutely dominated Andy Behrens and Matt Harmon. So I'm not saying there's any pressure on you, but if you wanted to come in and, just assert your dominance out of it feels like rookie year, best year.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Are we afraid?
It's all downside for me. I never should have entered that contest last year. You concocted the rules for that contest, and we're not doing it the same way this year.
I had nothing to do.
It was a rigged
I was a new guy. The new guy doesn't get to concoct anything, right? Credit goes to our great producer, Dan, who came up with the rules. He's only great because he came up with rules that I could dominate. Okay, so let's start with some tips and tricks. Everybody needs to know something, one big thing going into their draft. So, Andy, let's start with you. Give me something big on your mind that everybody should be thinking about.
Okay, this is deceptively simple. I want you to win the month of September. That's what I want you to focus on. When you go into your draft, I don't want you thinking about collecting a bunch of injured players who, hey, maybe it's October, they'll come back, I'll be great. I don't want you looking at distant bye weeks. I don't want you thinking about schedule strength in December. I want you focused on the month of September. As you may know, at Yahoo, over many years, millions of leagues, we have some experience and we have plenty of data. If you start 3-0 in a Yahoo league, you have an 85% chance of making the playoffs in your league. If you start 0-3, you have about a 16% chance. 2-1, about 65. So there is a huge benefit to just coming out of the gates as a winning team. You can put yourself in a position to basically have the playoffs clinched before the calendar flips to October.
That is so contrary to what even I think sometimes going into the leagues with my friends, which is why maybe I only won this league. I didn't do well with any of my friends. All right, Tera, give me one big thing on your mind.
Andy is focused on September. I'm focused on August. I want you to pay attention to ADP, but don't adhere to ADP. When you think of ADP, a lot of people see the names at the top of the list and they feel inclined to take those players. They don't want to reach. They're not trying to make a mistake. But ADP is just a suggestion. It's the average draft position. You don't have to take the guys that are listed right up there at the top. Get your guys. Don't feel like don't be afraid to reach. Now, don't go crazy. Don't sit there and draft Keon Coleman in the second round. That's a little bit insane. Do love him, but not that high. But it's fun. It's fantasy football. Get your guys.
I love the way you said that, because one thing we're going to do throughout the course of the show is one of the things we're going to do is debate sort of where the ADP is on some people. And I say that because sometimes I think it can get a little intimidating, right? Sometimes for people that are new to this, the process, you look at it, you're like, well, this ADP has to be everything. I've got great experts here, right? And we all have experts across the community that we love. And we don't agree on players, right? So I think it's an important reminder, Andy, that sometimes even great players can be seen a little differently by great minds.
Yeah, listen, the whole big game is a barroom argument, right? It's a game of opinions. And as Tera said, the whole point is to have fun. So let's have some fun. Get the guys you like.
All right, so, by the way, if you're brand new to all of this and you can't figure out what's going on at all, fear not. All right, the fantasy football, we've got Fantasy University or the Yahoo app. If you haven't done anything, you don't even know where to start, either look at Fantasy U or look at the Yahoo app. We can get you into everything you need to know. But we're going to start a deep dive. So I mentioned it earlier. We're going to go through several positions. We're going to help everybody figure out who they should be looking at. So we're going to look at 3 categories: breakouts, fades, sleepers, okay? So I like to start, I'm polypositive, right? If we can't be happy in August, when can we be happy? So let's start with breakouts, okay? So Tera, give me somebody you think is about to have a breakout year.
We will start off with my guy. It is Drake London. I think Andy's heard me talk about Drake London 5,000 times. He's probably tired of it, but Drake London is my breakout player. of the year at wide receiver. Whenever I talk about Drake London, I feel like I have to defend him a little bit because the statistics, man, it's not been a positive progression. He has not reached a season with 1,000 receiving yards. He's had a total of 6 touchdowns. It's been a little bit bleak, but it's been understandable because he's had quarterbacks like Desmond Ridder, Marcus Mariota, Taylor Heineke. It hasn't been pretty at all. It's not his fault that he's underperformed. You can't really catch touchdowns from those type of guys when they're not throwing touchdowns. But now we've got Kirk Cousins in town, and he is the perfect quarterback to be able to rehabilitate Drake London, bring him to greatness. His ADP is a little aggressive. Part of that is me. I might be the problem there, but he is a guy that I absolutely think is going to have a breakout season, and recommending him everywhere.
Yeah, I think the collective sigh that you heard earlier this spring was the moving on of Arthur Smith, right? I think all fantasy owners are looking to saying, glory be, what can it be next? All right, Andy, give me somebody you think is going to break out.
Yeah, I'm going to cheat a little bit and talk about somebody who's already kind of had a breakout season.
Cheating, by the way.
Yeah, we're just getting started.
So apparently we were the cheaters, but you're already cheating.
Basically, first show of the season, I'm already cheating. Zay Flowers had a really good rookie season. If all he does this year is run that back, 77 catches, over 900 scrimmage yards, like he was fine. He was great. And where he's going in drafts, if you just get that production, it's okay. I just think there is a side to his game that is entirely untapped. You look at the way he got his numbers last year. A lot of the balls that were thrown to him were like at or near the line of scrimmage. One of the lowest average depth of targets in the league is about 8.8 yards. He was so good as a deep threat in college. Like you watch the college highlights and you're like, man, this guy gets deep. Nobody can cover him. We're getting splash plays. We didn't see a ton of that, but that is obviously in Lamar Jackson's game. He's tied to a 2-time MVP quarterback. If they just ask a little bit more of Zay Flowers, he can clearly give it. So I think he can be a player who goes from like 900 yards and hey, this guy's pretty helpful, to 1,200, 1,300 yards, 90 catches. If he just stays healthy for us, I think we're getting a monster season.
Especially Derrick Henry being a part of that offense means defense is going to have to adjust to that as well. Presents opportunity. Okay, I'm going to go full Always Sunny in Philadelphia here and give you a wild card. If you don't know the reference, you should. I'm going to give you a different player to think about. I want to get you guys' opinion on. I'm going to go with Jackson Smith-Njigba with Seattle. So, Tara, what are your thoughts on Jackson?
Talent. Tons of talent there, and it's just the problem of having both DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett there. But it's possible that he could break out this season. He certainly has the talent to do so. His ADP is nice. You're not having to be extremely aggressive on him. And we've got a new offensive coordinator as well, so it's possible that things shift a little bit. Maybe he steps up and he's that primary receiver. Even the secondary option between him and DK can push ahead and add value this season.
You nodded. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think there's a thrill of the unknown factor here with the Ryan Grubb offense. I'm really excited for it because it's one thing that we just haven't seen it in Seattle over the years. Even though like a high percentage of the plays might be passing plays, they play a little bit slow. They're not trying to get to the line particularly fast. I think we're going to get a ton of passing volume in this offense. I think it can support 3 fantasy-worthy receivers. I think JSN is going to be one of those. By the end of the season last year, we were getting a highlight a week out of that guy. And if we ramp up the volume for him even a little bit, I think it can be a great season.
One thing Jory stressed on Inside Coverage for Yahoo Sports is that the league considers the beginning of the year to be a 20%. What we mean by that is 20% you can't really scout for. When you have a new offensive coordinator to the league, I don't care what you did in college. Yeah. When you have a new offensive coordinator to the league, I have to wonder if that 20% jumps to 30%. And if that's an early advantage, comes back to something you started with. Can you start 3-0? Like, can Jackson have some impact early on? All right. So from the positive all the way to the negative, I'm sorry, I got to be, Debbie Downer now. Let's go to the fades. So we're going to take a look at somebody that we're fading. Tara, who are you fading?
Let's start off with the Texans wide receiver core. There's so many of them, right? We've got Tank Dell, we've got Nico Collins, we've got Stephon Diggs. CJ Stroud is amazing, but can all of them succeed in this offense? They're all being drafted relatively high. I'm fading Stephon Diggs, unfortunately. He's the new guy to the scene. He's the older guy on the team. And a lot of times you see these guys transition over older in career and head over to these new teams, and suddenly there's a significant drop-off for them. Combine that with the problem of we've technically seen drop-offs over the past 2 seasons, back half of the seasons, every single time. And I found excuses for it. I'm not like super anti Stephon Diggs. There have been reasons suspensions and injuries and changes in coordinator. But the problem is that it keeps happening over and over again. At some point, we have to say, man, maybe it's you, unfortunately. Maybe you've reached that point where making it through an entire season just isn't something you can do at this point. So when I'm looking at that Texans offense, unfortunately, it's Stephon Diggs is the one that I'm fading.
That makes me nervous only because Diggs has been a problem for the last 2 quarterbacks he's had. 2 nice guys at quarterback. Now he goes into C.J. Stroud, who is still young in his development as a leader. I just wonder if he is faded, what that means for the entire organization. All right, Andy, give us something. What are you fading?
Yeah, listen, at the top, I talked about the importance of winning September. So anybody who's dealing with an injury right now, I'm not proactively targeting, and that, unfortunately, Hollywood Brown fits that description. I think he's a wonderful fit in the offense, and if he'd had a perfectly healthy August, I'd be all in on him. Unfortunately, he's dealing with an SC joint injury. It's a 4 to 6 week injury. So now we're talking about a player on a new team, new quarterback, no camp, right? No preseason. He's missing a lot of important reps. May or may not be ready for week 1. That is the perfect description of the sort of player I'm not trying to take on, because again, I want to run the table in September. I want my September to set up the whole season and basically position me for the playoffs. I don't want to have to worry about a guy that I took in like the 6th round. Oh, are you going to be available? And if you are available, are you going to see any volume? Because you're basically just meeting your quarterback. So Hollywood Brown, unfortunately, somebody I'm out on.
All right, again, I get to give you a wild card. Okay, so I'm going to give you a name here, and I feel a little weird doing this because everybody loves this guy, so I'm just going to see. Andy, tell me what you think. When I say Christian Watson, Green Bay, you say?
Oh, I love him.
Okay.
I'll tell you the best thing about Christian Watson this camp. There aren't a lot of news and notes on his player page. We're not discussing his hamstrings. That's awesome. All we needed out of Christian Watson was a really quiet camp in which he just stays healthy, stays on the field, continues working with Jordan Love, because the story of his career to this point has been, wow, when he's on the field, it's awesome. He's still a developing player, but when he plays, as an athlete, there are just no other guys in that receiving core who look like Christian Watson, right? That size-speed combo. He just needed to stay healthy, and so far that's happened. He's committed to, he seems to think that he's solved the hamstring problem that was bothering him for the first couple of years of his career. If that's true, and we get 16 games out of that guy, it's an easy 1,100 yards.
Yeah, but that's a big if, and I think, look, I don't want to, throw shade on the Packers here, but
let's do that.
I mean, especially with the Bears fan over there. But it was half a good season for Jordan Love. I understand he got paid and everybody wants to make a big deal about it, but it was half a good season. We forget how bad the first half of the season was because he got momentum. Isn't there some logic that a lot of young weapons, guys not healthy, quarterback only had half a good 1 year?
Yeah.
See, I'm not buying it at all.
Well, no, but it's not Jordan Love. Yeah, this is awkward because Andy is the Bears guy and I'm the Packers girl, but I am not supporting Christian Watson, and I feel bad about that. I really do. But the problem is that it's not an issue with Christian Watson and himself. It's that it is so crowded. It is such a talented group of receivers, and we genuinely have no idea exactly who is going to pop. Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. We don't even know what to do at the tight end position. So I struggle to get behind the Packers receivers because, unfortunately, we don't exactly know, and there's no way to know which one of them is going to be the real big value in this offense. It might be none of them.
All right, haters going to hate, so we'll shake it off, and we'll go to some sleepers now. All right, there, you're welcome. Taylor Swift reference is going to make the show huge. Tara, give me a sleeper that you're looking at.
We'll go to another ambiguous wide receiver core in Buffalo and talk about Khalil Shakir as a little sleeper here. I love what I saw out of Shakir at the end of last season. He made a little progression there, and especially in the playoffs, popped 10 receptions, multiple touchdowns, really showcased that he does have the capability of being the target hog in this Buffalo Bills offense. Now, we've got talent coming in. We've got Keon Coleman, we've got Curtis Samuel, and we've got the ever-present Dalton Kincaid potentially having a nice breakout year here. And so there's so many options here. But at Khalil Shakir's ADP, it's not a massive investment into him. And if he ends up being the guy that is the sneaky target hog in this offense, it is going to pay dividends for anyone that drafts him.
Andy?
I'm going to go with a rookie here, and I'm going to take Brian Thomas Jr., first-round pick of the Jacksonville Jaguars. this is a perfect pairing of quarterback and receiver, and we don't see it this seamless that often in the NFL. Like, whatever you think about Trevor Lawrence, and there's a wide range of opinions on Trevor Lawrence and where he's at in his development and in his career, but you cannot argue that he has been anything less than one of the best deep ball throwers since he came into the league. He's got a huge arm, and he's been very good at, like, when they stretch the field, it works. Nobody is better at that in this rookie class than Brian Thomas Jr. It was just a spectacular part of his game at LSU. 17 yards per reception last year, 17 touchdowns. As a athlete, there are a few people in the NFL like him. 6'4", 4.3 speed, near 40-inch vertical. So he's just a perfect fit for this offense. I don't think he's going to come off the field that often. I think there's a huge touchdown total here, and he's not in the range of the other buzzy rookie receivers, right? Like the other guy, Marvin Harrison Jr. is super expensive in drafts. Neighbors is expensive in drafts. You can get Brian Thomas Jr. in a hometown league. You can get him outside the top 60 wide receivers easy, and the potential payoff here is huge.
You mentioned spectacular. We have a really exciting announcement for Yahoo Fantasy managers. You can now link your existing Yahoo Fantasy account with your YouTube TV account to track your team and your opponents in real time while watching the game on Sunday. So game scores, projected points, player scores, all of it's available in Fantasy View. It's going to be awesome this fantasy season. Device and content restrictions apply. All right, guys, let's have a little bit of fun here. With some over-unders. And over-unders with ADP, because you mentioned earlier, don't let ADP be everything to you. So instead of saying over-under, which gets wildly confusing, we're going to say outperform or underperform, because I'm just going to be honest with you, all the production meeting got really confusing when we tried to figure out over-under. So outperform, underperform. I'm going to give you some names, and you guys tell you where the position is. You tell me if we think they're going to outperform or underperform. Let's start with one guy that really helped me win a lot of games last year, Devon Achane, all right? RB11, third round, Tera. What do you think?
Oh, underperform, unfortunately.
No.
Yeah, there's a lot of concerns here, and I do love him, and the upside is spectacular, but the issue here is that it's a committee backfield, right? And he is a smaller back, he has dealt with a wide variety of injuries, and this is a backfield where we have Raheem Mostert. Everybody forgets about Raheem Mostert. It was a fantastic season last year. He's not just going away, he's still a part of it. I feel like we're drafting him as if Raheem Mostert is just going to be pushed to the side, and all of a sudden we're going to have Devon Achane step up and just be fantastic. And while that's the case, we're underestimating just how much this committee backfield is going to be. So the ADP, it's like, okay, but if there's one way I got to lean, unfortunately, it's underperform.
Andy?
Yeah, I think Achane is one of those guys who has an unusually large potential range of outcomes here. And on the downside, it's just guy tied to a committee that might not even be two people. Like, they also took Jalen Wright, who was an enormously successful back in the SEC, like a 1,000-yard rusher in the SEC, 4.3 speed. He's like
explosive.
That only makes you like the 7th fastest Dolphins skill player, right? But like by the rest of the league standards, is a really fast dude. So this could be a 3-person backfield. But obviously, at the upside, Achane averaged almost 8 yards per carry last year, and when he was fully operational, fully healthy early in the season, he put together a 3-game string with like 7 touchdowns, 170 scrimmage yards per week. So I get it. I understand why people talk themselves into him. I just have him ranked a little bit lower than where he goes. But I respect people who can go ahead and pull the trigger in the early 3rd round on Achane. It just hasn't been me yet.
Look, as somebody that covered all of his college highlights, covering college football, I drafted him last year in every one of my keeper leagues, so I need both of you to be drastically wrong. All right, let's take a look at the quarterback position. Kyler Murray, big name for everybody. QB7 right now, 5th round. So, Andy, what do you think? Kyler Murray, QB7, 5th round.
Yeah, I think he's a steal. I think Kyler Murray is kind of the outer edge of the range of quarterbacks who can reasonably finish as the overall QB1. Kyler already has a season under his belt in which he was the overall QB3. We've seen an 800-yard rushing season from him. He's never had a receiving core like he does this year, right? It's not just Trey McBride. Like, Trey McBride was a nice story in the second half last year. Now we had like a generational receiver in Marvin Harrison Jr. to that mix. So he's never had he's had big name receivers at the wrong point in their career before. He's never had a collection of talent around him like this. So I think he's in a great situation. if he plays 15, 16 games, we're going to get 600 rushing yards, maybe a half dozen TDs. And that's kind of the price of admission to be the overall QB1, right? You have to have some rushing upside. Well, he's got it, and now he's got a cast of characters in the receiving core that are great as well.
By the way, your opinion is so strong that the number's already moved. I hear that we've got it. It's a QB6 now. So, Tera, like, just so you know, it's QB6. Andy just says 1, and all of a sudden he goes up a spot. What do you think?
I'm moving markets over here.
So I agree, but maybe I'll try and stabilize the market here and give a little bit of So I agree, overperform is the way to lean and very realistic. I do get a counter that there is some injury concern here. There have been major and minor little injuries that have kind of plagued Kyler Murray throughout his career. I know that I've fallen victim, unfortunately, to one of those end of the year slight injuries that brings him down, and he's either not available or underperforms, and it just wasn't as good as it was in the beginning of the season. So there's always that weird little caveat with him. If he can get past that 100%, overperform, fantastic. Love Marvin Harrison Jr., but you hesitate a little bit with the possibility there.
Yeah, he's a wee little man. Let's just be honest. He's a wee little man. I just said that about a quarterback in the NFL. I don't know how I feel about that. All right, let's get one more in here at the wide receiver position. Amari Cooper, currently wide receiver 23, 5th round. So, what do you think, Behrens?
Is it okay if I say that I feel like this is the right price for Amari Cooper?
Absolutely not.
No, take a stance.
I hate to have the take that is like, oh yeah, we're doing about the right thing on Amari, but that's kind of how I feel. I think this balances upside and downside, and it balances sort of the fact that we know there are going to be huge Amari Cooper weeks. Like, that's the story of his career. I mean, the guy had a 265-yard game with Joe Flacco last year. So when it's all clicking for Amari Cooper, it's a spectacular game. They don't all look that way. But he is coming off a great year. I think he's at a wonderful point in his career. And I think, he's coming off a season that was in many ways a career best. I don't trust his quarterback situation. And I think Tera's going to disagree with me a little bit on that. And I agree that there's some upside to Deshaun Watson, because Deshaun Watson at his best has been he's led the league in passing. I get it. He's the best version of Deshaun Watson is a really, really good quarterback. We just haven't seen that guy in 4 years. And each of the last 2 seasons looks exactly the same. He was the same kind of bad last year that he was the year before, and I am beginning to doubt whether he can get it back.
Spoiler alert, yes, Deshaun Watson is my QB sleeper. But ironically, and I feel like I'm being Debbie Downer here, I'm on the underperform for Amari Cooper, because I don't think Deshaun is the issue here. It's that consistency that you mentioned, Andy, year after year. If there's someone that I want to count on getting me 1,000 receiving yards, absolutely Amari Cooper. I know that's going to happen. But the problem is that what's it look like on a game-to-game basis is the major issue there. 1 week you're getting 25 fantasy points. The next week you're getting 2 fantasy points, and you never know how to predict it. It's just so wild, and it makes me lean on the under for him.
I talked to somebody that coached Amari, knows him well, and I asked him about this very thing, the inconsistency. I said, what's the problem with Amari Cooper? And his answer was, if I knew that, I'd probably still be coaching him, right? They couldn't figure it out. They saw it during games. They saw it during practice. That some weeks he's engaged, some weeks he's not. So for that reason, I'm with you. His final number is going to be great, but I don't trust him week to week. All right, let's go to the running back position, and we'll do the same thing. We'll start with breakouts at the running back position, and I will give you, Tera, the floor first. Give me somebody you think is about to just have that epic breakout moment.
Oh, my breakout is Tajay Spears. I was hit with a downer when Tony Pollard was signed, because I was hoping that he was going to step into this 3-down back role, but I don't think that that's going to stop him from breaking out here. This is going to be a committee backfield, a 1A, 1B, maybe 1A, 1A type of situation where the hot hand gets the edge here. And if there's a guy that I'm counting on to have the hot hand in this offense, it's going to be Tajay Spears. He looked amazing last season next to Derrick Henry, playing off of him. He was electric, elusive. He had every single quality that you want in a running back, the pass catching upside. And I think that at the end of the day, he can just outshine and overperform and just take over that backfield and become the guy in an offense that might be a little sneaky in terms of the value that it can provide in Tennessee.
Andy?
This is the closest that I'm going to come on this show to pandering to you.
Oh,
Fitz.
my God, yes. I know it's coming at this point. Thank you so much, America.
I got a rater for you.
There we go.
I'm pretty into Zamir White. And you can argue that he had his breakout basically in the final month of the 2023 season, right? He steps in for Josh Jacobs when Jacobs went down. Over a 4-week span, he averaged 114 scrimmage yards per week. He was one of the league's few just every down, full workload backs, averaged over 22 touches per week. That's kind of the dream scenario for a running back, right? Like, we just don't get a lot of that in today's game. Huge offseason winner. The only meaningful thing that the team does at running back is they bring in Alexander Mattison, who we're all kind of over. I think it's going to be the Zamir White show. I think in their ideal world, they hold teams. Tera and I have talked about this a couple times. I think in their ideal world, they hold their opponent to 17 points per game. I think that's going to be a really good defense, and I think they run the ball all day. And I think Zamir White is the biggest part of that. So I think he has a real chance to take what he did at the end of last season, extend it over a full year. And now we're talking about a back who gives us 1,500, 1,600 scrimmage yards. I think that's really in the range of outcomes for him. Do I think he's going to score 15 touchdowns? No, I don't think it's going to be necessarily a prolific offense with Gardner Minshew.
Why do you have to do that?
Controls.
We're having so much fun.
I know. I was doing such a good job pandering, which is the way I should have kept it. But I really think Zamir White's setup is otherwise ideal.
Your best take you've ever had in the history of the show. All right, let's go to a fade now, Tera. What do you got for fades?
Oh, my fade is Najee Harris. Unfortunately, I feel like we know, and it's not a negative one, we know who Najee is. We know he is an early down back. We know that it is a committee with Jaylen Warren. We know that he's going to have goal line touches, but that's the problem. We know exactly what he is. Now, granted, we do have Jaylen Warren that is dealing all of a sudden with an injury that might carry over into the beginning of the season, and maybe that's even a bit of an additional problem. Maybe that makes his ADP rise up a little bit for Najee Harris. If it rises, I can't be in on that cost. When I look at Najee Harris in that range that he's going in, you mentioned he's right around there with your guy Zamir White. If I'm looking at those guys and I'm saying, who do I want to go with? The guy that I know for sure is going to get me low-end RB2 numbers. I can rely on him. He's going to play the whole season. I can start him week after week, but I know he doesn't have that overall RB1 upside. Or do I turn to a guy like Zamir White and say this is a guy that has, at least within the realm of possibility, of well overperforming his ADP? It makes me fade Najee Harris and turn any other direction.
God, the takes are so good here. All right, give me yours, Andy.
It brings me no pleasure to fade Austin Eckler, but I got to do it. And maybe the year to do it would have been last year, right? But he relocates, number one, and now he's in a backfield with Bijan Robinson, who's a really good player. And Robinson already demonstrated last year that, what we thought was maybe a hole in his game, receiving ability, well, he's got that. So there's some overlap in skills here. Eckler obviously approaching 30, coming off a season in which an injury really compromised him, took away his acceleration. He wasn't very efficient. We don't know to what extent. Sometimes we see a high ankle sprain, older player. Sometimes that stuff carries over to the next season. Mostly I'm just looking at this Washington offense right now, and he's also tied to a super exciting quarterback in Jaden Daniels. But oftentimes what we get with proactive rushing quarterbacks is they are not looking to check the ball down to their running backs, right? Why would I throw it to you? I'm just going to go get these yards. Why would I throw it to you? I don't need that. So I don't see a path to 75 catches for Eckler. I don't think he's going to be the goal line guy. And if I don't think you're going to be the primary receiving threat out of the backfield, and I don't think you're going to be the goal line guy, I'm just not that interested. All
right, I'm going to throw a wild card in just to you, Andy. You ready for this? Because you know this player better than most. Chicago, that's why. DeAndre Swift. What do you got for Swift?
Yeah, this is a messy backfield, and they are running Khalil Herbert a lot in the preseason. If you were to just go off preseason usage, and it lies all the time, so you shouldn't, but if you just went off that, you'd say, oh man, Khalil Herbert runs this backfield. And that's he's a pretty good player. So DeAndre, I think, is best used as a committee back. I know he got paid a lot by running back standards. I know that the team threw money at him and they're trying to, build up the sort of collection of skill talent around Caleb Williams, as they should. He's another weapon, but I don't think he's going to be the clear featured guy. I'd be really surprised by it. I know he had a nice season in Philadelphia last year. He's also one of these weird backs where a lot of the yards he gets are before contact, which is fine. That's its own skill. It's not the skill that we usually talk about. Oh man, we want yards after contact, and those are the guys that really flash to us. And he's more of a yards before contact guy. I just don't see him being able to repeat exactly what he did last year, and I think Khalil Herbert is going to be a real problem.
All right, let's move to sleepers. Tera, you're up. Who do you have to sleep?
My sleeper is Jonathan Brooks. It's weird leaning into the Carolina offense, but they do have a new head coach. And that new head coach has a lot of specialties, and one of them was on display last year when he turned Rachaad White into one of the most fantasy usable backs in the league, especially in PPR. And when I look at Jonathan Brooks, I see a lot of similarities there for him in the way that he can be utilized in that offense in the exact same way that Rachaad White was utilized. So when I look at him and drafting him, I don't mind the fact that he's only going to be available in week 3 or 4. Dave Canales came out and said that he's not going to start the season. We know that for a fact. I don't think that's a major issue because that means you don't have to reach on him. You can draft him as your RB3. You can sit him on your bench. You're not going to have to rely on him as a starter. Now you can say, okay, this is my guy. I'm waiting for him to have that back half breakout. You don't have to feel pushed to put him into your starting lineup before he's ready. But when he gets in there, I think the upside for RB1 top 12 is really there for him with his skill set.
Nuance there. Two things can be true. You can be drafting the way Andy told you at the beginning and still pick a player up like that and be accomplishing what you need. All right, give me a sleeper for you, Andy.
Okay, well, this is a really good transition because you mentioned Rachaad White, and my sleeper is really kind of a stealth way to fade Rachaad White, who was incredibly useful last year. I get it. Like, the year-end totals were perfectly fine. Not a super efficient player. 3.5 yards per carry. I mentioned yards after contact. That wasn't his thing either. He was like 2.5 yards after contact. He was way down on the list. He's fine, but he's not a superstar. They have a guy on the roster now, a rookie out of Oregon, Bucky Irving, who I think can really be a thing. And he's been a high buzz player in the preseason. Scored a touchdown in the preseason opener for that team. Between the tackle stuff, he's coming off back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons at the college level, and more importantly, he's caught 87 balls over the last 2 years. Last year, 56 catches. So this is the best part of Rachaad White's game, right? Is his contributions as a receiver. He was great in that role last year. Irving can do that. So now we have a guy on the roster who I think can really challenge him on early downs, and I think should be a rotational rusher for that team right away. So I see him as somebody who can have flex value initially and can just perhaps outproduce Rachaad White. And if he does that, now we're talking about somebody who steps into a big role in the second half.
All right, Tara, you get the wild card this time, and the wild card is Chase Brown, Bengals. What do you got?
Oh, I love Chase Brown. I do. Oh, man. I understand Zach Moss looked absolutely fantastic last year in relief, or pre-reliefs, I guess, of Jonathan Taylor when he wasn't playing, and he looked great. He's 3 down back capable. But when I look at Rachaad White and I'm looking at this offense, I want to take the guy who it's an ambiguous backfield. I want to take the guy who has the lower value in that backfield, and it's Chase Brown. You can draft him a little bit later, and when I look at him and the receiving upside that he has, it seemed like the Bengals were really wanting to lean into that receiving upside that he had. And when you look back at Joe Mixon, goal line opportunity for there. His yards per carry, not so fantastic. He wasn't the most efficient running back in the world, but what really always pushed him over that edge and made him successful was that receiving upside. So when I think in the context of this Bengals offense, who do I want? I want the one that I think is going to be there on third down, because from a fantasy perspective, that is the value that we'll have. I think he can outshine and overtake Zach Moss.
We're just getting started here. But in the meantime, what if I told you there was a way to win $1 million just by playing Yahoo Fantasy? That's right. You heard me right. Check this out.
Sign up for Yahoo Fantasy Football for your chance to win $1 million. That's right, $1 million. Just create or join a private Yahoo Fantasy League and enter the sweepstakes. If any of the players in your lineup score a touchdown in any of the Week 1 games on NBC or Peacock, then you get a bonus entry into the sweepstakes. Earn up to 8 entries, 1 for signing up and up to 7 for touchdowns. Do not miss out. The deadline is September 5th, so enter now for your chance to win $1 million at yahoo.com/fantasymillion.
It is time to build your 4, sponsored by NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube TV. So what we're going to have our fantasy draft analysts do here is pick their first 4 picks they'd want in the first 4 rounds of the fantasy draft. Are you guys ready for this challenge? Feel good about it? Andy, you get to go first. Okay, Andy, so give us your 4, build your 4.
Okay, my first rounder, and admittedly, you can't get this guy with every pick in the first round, but anytime I can get Tyreek Hill, I want him. people we forget because everybody's got like CeeDee Lamb at the top of the ranks for wide receiver. I think Tyreek Hill is a tier of his own wideout. We got through 12 weeks last year and he was on a 2,100 yard receiving pace, not 2,000 yards. He was going to shatter the single season record. And then he gets injured. It's a high ankle sprain. He plays through it. He's a little sluggish at the end of the year, not his usual self. Still finishes the season leading the league in receiving yards and receiving touchdowns. If we'd gotten a full season out of that guy, we're talking absolute historic stuff. So that's a guy I want in the first round. Again, I think he's got a skill set unlike any other wideouts. In the second round, and I'm going to give you a guy who you can sometimes get in the third, but I don't personally have the discipline to do that. So I'll just go ahead and take Isaiah Pacheco in round 2. Huge offseason winner, right? They don't do anything at the running back spot other than let Jerick McKinnon walk. Pacheco proved last year that he's a very competent receiver. 44 catches on 49 targets, so almost perfect in the receiving game. We love him as a rusher. Like stylistically, he's really fun. He's also tied to an offense that might average 30 points per game. So that is what we want. We want a high volume back tied to an explosive offense. That's what he is. In the third round, I'm gonna pivot a little bit and go old and boring. Mike Evans. Mike Evans been in the league 10 years. He has 1,000 receiving yards in every one of those seasons. It is metronomically just the same year after year. It's 1,000 yards and like 10 or 12 touchdowns. Each of the last 4 years, or over the last 4 years, he's got 46 receiving scores. With Baker Mayfield last year, it looked just like the seasons with Tom Brady, right? He's great. He is reliably great. So that's the kind of bankable fantasy asset that I want. I think he can again finish as a top 10 wide receiver. You don't have to pay that kind of price. In the fourth round, man, I want a piece of that Ryan Grubb offense. I want to see what that looks like in Seattle. I've always thought that DK Metcalf has the skills to deliver like a top 3 receiver season, right? He is physically unlike most players in the NFL. Man, if he gets that Rome Odunze sort of role, and it's dangerous to project a college offense onto the NFL, but if he's getting some of those vertical shots, man, I want that. There is definitely a path for DK to finish as a top 5, top 3 fantasy wideout.
All right, Tara, what do you got?
Andy and I are kind of twins on this one. My round one, I guess that means, hey, if I agree with you, it must mean I'm smart. So round one
Let's go with that.
Yeah, exactly. It's Tyreek Hill for me. So I'll just go ahead and jump to round 2 with Kyren Williams, which I feel like is a little bit of a controversial one because everyone is so worried about, we've talked about size here. He is a smaller back, right? There's the injury risk with him. We saw it last year, although after the injury, he jumped right back into the exact player that he was. And there's little worry about Blake Corum here. But for me, when I look at him, I see Blake Corum was drafted to be the handcuff in the event that they have to go through a short period of time without Kyren Williams so the offense doesn't drop off. They've made the comparison there. They're the same, very similar backs here. Kyren Williams in the second round, in the first round would be a little bit too much, but in the second round, I like the high upside risk there with him. In the third round, again, thinking like Andy, I'm going old, a little bit, maybe not so boring. Travis Kelce pushed all the way back to the third round, which is crazy. He's usually someone that we got to grab in the first round. We were sitting there having to reach and take him as your first overall pick. But now we can wait. We can get him in the third round. I can't pass up the value for a guy who more than likely can finish as the tight end 1 overall. And then in round 4, I love the value for Devonta Smith. I would take him earlier than that. I look at this new offense that we're going to have here in Philadelphia with Kellen Moore, and I just have so much faith in the bounce back that's going to happen here. And I think one of the biggest beneficiaries is going to be Devonta Smith. I think we've seen that top 10 performance out of him, and I think this is the season where he can return to a top 10 receiver again.
I feel like Old and Not So Boring would be a show that Andy and I would host together. I don't know. This has been Build Your 4, sponsored by NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube TV, where you can watch up to 4 games at once with multi-view device and content restrictions apply. Now, one thing we have to do every year is take a look at some people, new places. That can be rookies, it can be people that are in new teams, and there's several of those. So wanted to select a few that everybody's really talking about from a fantasy standpoint. And let's start by one that simply by highlights is everywhere. Malik Neighbors right now. I feel like the world has fallen in love. You're nodding your head. What do you see from Malik?
Oh, I love Malik Neighbors. We got that terrible outing from Daniel Jones, but I don't care. I mean, Malik Neighbors had just fantastic morale miraculous, just elevating catches to catch those off-throw targets. It's okay. Daniel Jones doesn't have to be perfect. Malik Neighbors is. So when I look at him, I love the fact that he is separating himself as the clear wide receiver one in this offense. It is not questioned here. I understand the offense itself and the existence of Daniel Jones is going to cap him. He can't get to that Marvin Harrison Jr. level, but we're not drafting him as a Marvin Harrison Jr. We're drafting him at a reasonable-ish ADP where I think he is well worth the value.
So this is a guy that I don't feel like I dislike him, and yet I haven't drafted him anywhere, which probably tells you something, right? Daniel Jones, we're 5 years into the Daniel Jones era. He has not yet produced an 800-yard receiver, and that's not all on Daniel Jones. Some of that is the receiving core for the Giants over that time, and I agree that they've never had a dude like Malik Neighbors. Again, I like him. Daniel Jones caps this offense in a way that makes me really uncomfortable, and you're right in saying that you don't have to draft him where you're taking Harrison, but you do have to draft him at a point where we have to start him, right? Like, you're still drafting him as like a top 25 receiver, which means you're not sticking him on the bench and calling him a flyer. Like, I got to play him in week 1, and Daniel Jones is his quarterback. And if they need a safety net, we're going to Drew Lock, and there's no good answer there, right? So that is my reservation on Malik Neighbors. Again, great player.
I love him in a keeper league, so that when they actually get the quarterback situation figured out, he's going to blow up. What about Marvin Harrison Jr.? We've all talked about him. Andy, what are your thoughts on Marvin?
All systems go. I am very in on Marvin Harrison Jr. When people take him in the second round, I don't even blink. Of course, he's a second rounder. Like, as soon as we get past A.J. Brown, I'm all in on Marvin Harrison Jr. I think the upside is significant. You're talking about a nearly flawless receiving prospect. Size, speed, history of multiple years of incredible production. He did it against some great defenses, so he is proven. I love everything about him. I like his quarterback situation. We like the offense. He's going to be the clear number one. It's one of those situations where there's two dudes in that receiving core that we really care about, and it's Harrison and it's McBride. I just think it's a great situation for him. He's got a clean path to a top 10 finish.
I completely agree. I mean, when we look at what he brings to this table, we talked about Kyler Murray earlier, and it's been a while since we've seen him with that true alpha receiver, that young wide receiver one. And I feel like him in this offense, stepping immediately into this role, we're taking a lot of faith, drafting him potentially at his ceiling here. But at the end of the day, he's got the talent, the offense, and the quarterback to absolutely be able to hit that ADP. So I love Marvin Harrison Jr. in this offense.
Humble brag, I'm a Bolitnikoff Award voter, so I have a vote on the best wide receiver in college football. I have for several years. The most stunning stat to me is over the last 2 years combined, the number of drops credited to Marvin Harrison Jr. is 0. That just tells you everything you need to know. That's stunning. So I agree with you guys on all that. Let's go to some guys that are in the league but in new places. Joe Mixon, what are your thoughts?
I can take it or leave it.
All this praise for the young kids.
Yeah. I mean, he's Joe Mixon, right? You know.
And there we go.
It's not the most inspiring pick. His efficiency, questionable. I feel like I'm always just kind of waiting for him to fall off, but he never does. Yeah. That's the thing. He never does fall off. And when you take him and you put him in this Houston offense, things look very similar to the situation that he had in Cincinnati. There's going to be plenty of goal line opportunities. He is the back. He's not going to be challenged on that. He's the clear 3-down back, so he'll get all of those goal line touches. He'll have the receiving upside that he had. So it just seems like a very logical transition over there. You always worry about age and somebody going to a new team, but I mean, when you draft him, I don't feel like there's a ton to worry about. It's not the most fancy, inspiring pick, but it's not something that's going to break the bank on you.
You agree?
Yeah, I think Tera hit the key point, which is he could fall off a cliff at any moment because we're at 1,700 career carries and counting if you look at his postseason stats as well. So he's a pretty high mileage back, but all he's got to do is be a little bit better than Devin Singletary was last year, and Singletary had a really good season. That was 1,100 yards. Joe Mixon, to me, is still better than that. And this offense in Houston is going to be better than it was last year. I mean, they've added in the receiving core. So we're talking about a team that I think is going to be one of the most explosive in the league. league, like Joe Mixon can maybe lose a step and still finish with 12 touchdowns. So I think if you're somebody who starts their draft receiver, tight end, and you're still eyeing Joe Mixon in round 4, that's a huge win. That's a great way to start your backfield.
All right, so let's do a quick one real quick here. Any thoughts on Calvin Ridley?
I love it. For the ADP, the value, perfect. I think people are underestimating what he can be in Tennessee.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the Tennessee offense, I'm not gonna call them the Houston Texans of this season, but if you're looking for one of those offenses that like nobody expects anything from but could really pop, they've done a lot of great things around Will Levis, and if Will Levis takes a leap, Calvin Ridley's in for a great year.
All right, speaking of, well, no, we're not. I thought we were going to go to backs. No, we're not. We're going to go to tight ends because this is the question everybody's got to figure out. Like, tight ends have become polarizing in the fantasy football community. Everybody's trying to figure out the right spot. We've fallen in love with some tight ends. So I guess the real question here, Tera, is like, what is the right approach for everybody going into this draft on where to take a tight end?
With tight end, this is the place where you want to pay attention to ADP. I know I said earlier ADP, but with tight ends specifically, ADP rankings and tiers are the best way to approach them. There are clear breaks, in my opinion, in terms of the way that we're looking at these guys. You got your first big 4 that are in kind of like a league of their own, right? We know what they can be. They've been proven before. They've got that high upside. They can all easily finish as the overall tight end 1. Then you kind of got a little break, Dalton Kincaid, and you got guys like George Kittle, Evan Ingram, and Kyle Pitts, all very reliable guys there that you can kind of look at and say, I feel like I can get, some good production out of this range. I trust it. I don't feel like I'm reaching. I feel very comfortable with drafting these guys. And then everyone else after that is kind of like you're taking stabs on them. You can still go there. You can still go with the Brock Bowers if you want to, right? Yeah, there we go. We can still go with the Brock Bowers. But I think the best way to approach tight end this season is by really paying attention to those tiers, adhering to them, and not reaching too much, just taking an appropriate approach with them.
I think the only reason we put this in here so you could talk about Sam Laporta drinking game on FFL. What do you got for us?
Oh gosh, that's right. I'd almost forgotten about Iowa legend Sam Laporta. I feel like we're actually in a transitional year at tight end. There, as you know, I've been playing fantasy for a million years, right? For decades. I'm a very old man. Tight end has never looked like this. Like the whole history of the tight end position is there's one guy who is clearly the king. And you can take this all the way back from Kelsey and Gronk and Gonzalez and Gates to like, I'm going to pander to you again, to Todd Christensen.
There we go.
Who for like 4 or 5 years was an absolute legend and was used as a receiver in ways that no other tight end was, right? You can go back further to like Ditka, John Matt. There's always one guy who is the dominant tight end. And now there's like 7 guys who I can tell you the story of how like Kyle Pitts, Dalton Kincaid, George Kittle, Mark Andrews. I can tell you a story about all these guys and how they would finish as the tight end 1. It could still be Kelsey. I could be overthinking this, and we're still very much in the Travis Kelce era, and he's still the number 1 tight end, but I feel like there's like 7 guys that I'm totally comfortable with and I can talk myself into. So for the first time in forever, we're not just like drafting that one guy in the first or second round and then just scramble drill at the end of the draft. Now I really feel like if you're in a 10-team league, like there's no worry here. Like there's 10 guys that I really like.
All right, so let's get back to the position breakdowns here as we look at breakouts, fades, and sleepers, and let's do it for everybody's favorite position in all of football, quarterbacks. All right, so we'll take a look at breakouts. Andy, who you got for us?
Yeah, I'm going to start with Anthony Richardson, and this is me. I'm done pandering to Fitz at this point, and I'm going to start pandering to my colleague Dalton Del Don, who has Anthony Richardson ranked as his number 1 QB overall. I'm not quite there.
Y'all have lost your minds. Come on.
But we are probably going to see a breakout if we just get like 14 or 15 games out of him. Obviously, he only plays 4 games last season, and I think only finished one of those games. But in those 4, his fantasy points per dropback, that number was historic. He gives us 7 combined touchdowns. I thought they designed an offense that, given his strengths and limitations, man, I thought that offense looked perfect for him. They gave him all kinds of layups. They have a really good receiving core. They have a really good offensive line. And of course, Anthony Richardson is this superhero level athlete who is going to deliver rushing stats and was the goal line back for that team. So we have a real chance that he's going to rush for 10 touchdowns, that he's going to pass for like 25 touchdowns. And that recipe is gold in fantasy, and it always makes guys a QB1 candidate.
I just want to go very on the record and say that That's a lot of ifs and buts. Like, I'm just off of a few games for somebody that didn't have a lot of college tape coming in. That was the knock. And, like, he still doesn't have a lot of tape, doesn't have a lot of experience. I'm just pushing back a little.
I will also say that this is the one spot, quarterback, where you can take a big swing. Because if you're in
fair.
The way most fantasy leagues are structured, we're talking like 10 teams, one quarterback. There's going to be guys out there. Last year, you could just pick up Jordan Love. You could just pick up C.J. Stroud. They were out there on waivers. So if you want to choose one spot where I'm just going to take a big swing, and if I'm right, it's quarterback.
All right, Tara, what do you got for us?
My line of thinking in terms of, one, the rushing upside as the guy that I want to target for a breakout quarterback, the same line of logic in terms of looking at these guys and saying quarterback is a place where it's okay to take a risk. So I'm taking a risk here with Jaden Daniels as a rookie breakout quarterback. Again, same kind of deal here. We're talking about a guy who has the big arm, touchdown equity, rushing upside, and could legitimately, in his rookie year, surge to a top 5 quarterback with relative ease if everything goes his way. And as a rookie quarterback, I know a lot of times these guys that are drafted early step into terrible situations, and Washington is not the ideal situation. But when we're talking about from a fantasy perspective, we're looking at this Washington offense and saying, okay, with this run game, we've got Bijan Robinson and Austin Eckler. Okay, they're solid over there. We've got Terry McLaurin, standout wide receiver that has just been waiting on his guy at quarterback, and this could finally be it. We've got depth there with Jahan Dotson, the addition of Luke McCaffrey. We've got, tight end there as well. New draft pick, Ben Sinnott, potentially Zach Ertz adding some. So when I look at everything that is surrounding Jaden Daniels, the new offense by Cliff Kingsbury, everything is just aligning perfectly for him to get pushed into this air raid type of offense, air it out. We're seeing it in preseason, run. We've got the rushing upside there. I love the potential for him. I'm not afraid to reach. That ADP is going to continue to steadily rise and be drafting him as a top 12 quarterback, but it's worth the risk because if something goes wrong, like Andy said, you can just go to the waiver wire because the quarterback is so deep. You're not taking this risk that is going to absolutely decimate your fantasy season.
All right, so you get the quick sleeper on this one. Your thoughts quick, or the wild card, your quick wild card on this one. I'm going to give you Jordan Love as the Packers fan. What do you think?
Oh, I'm in. Yeah. It's a repeat. No risk, no nothing. If you want a piece of the Packers offense, get.
You're just forgetting that Raiders game. We're just forgetting that Raiders game.
Yeah. I'm forgetting. Yeah, it never happened.
I'm the only person in the world that seems to not forget the first half of the season. All right, let's go to fades then, Andy. Who are you fading?
Yeah, for me, it's got to be Justin Herbert. Man, you talk about a guy who's facing some serious fantasy headwinds. I can't come up with a better name than that. Number one, he's like every other Chargers skill player, relevant player. He's a little bit hurt right now, just returned to practice with a foot injury. I'm not sure it's going to matter because they're not going to ask him to throw very much because this is a Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman collaboration. And man, you look at the deep history of Greg Roman offenses, and there have been many. They are frequently bottom 5 in the league in terms of overall pass attempts. They are often bottom 1 in the league in terms of pass attempts. So we're talking low volume situation here. I think they just want to run the ball all day. It feels like it's going to be a waste of Justin Herbert to an extent. I think he's great. He's already got a 5,000-yard season on his resume, but man, that receiving core hemorrhage talent too. Like nothing is going his way this offseason.
Tara, what do you got?
Mine's weird because mine's the opposite. There's so much surrounding my fade of Tua Tagovailoa. Just Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, all fantastic. But the problem with Tua is that we know exactly what we're getting out of him in fantastic games. The high upside, the multiple touchdowns, it'll be good from a fantasy perspective. But when he's in those games where he struggles towards the end of the season, there start to be cold games. I can understand. I don't like the cold. Unfortunately, Tua just completely drops off. And when I look at that playoff schedule, I know Andy said that he wants you to win in September, but I also want you to kind of pay attention to the fact that you will have to abandon ship on Tua Tagovailoa right around week 12 or so because he just will not be usable whatsoever in the fantasy playoffs. So unfortunately, my fade is Tua Tagovailoa because there's guys around there. That's where you can take a Jaden Daniels. You can take a Caleb Williams. Take that upside play. Take those guys that can go out there and win your league.
The other thing with Tua, he's coming off a season in which he was not a fantasy difference maker and he led the league in passing yards. So there's no rushing upside here. And we've talked about the rushing quarterbacks and that being a cheat code. Well, he does not have it. And if you don't have that, you basically have to throw for like 5,000 yards.
All right, so let me give you a wild card this time, Andy. Dak Prescott.
Man, I kind of feel like the Cowboys offense is, and listen, I realize that there are some key pieces that are currently missing from the practice field for the Cowboys, right? But I feel like they found something early last season when they were just like, you know what, we're going to give the keys to CeeDee Lamb and we're going to build the whole thing out of Dak and CeeDee, and we're going to see how that goes. And it was pretty great. Like Dak Prescott, when he is at his best, he's helping you win matchups and he's helping you win leagues. And I think we're going to get like a 4,500-yard season for him. They're in a weird spot with CD. They're in a weird spot with Dak contract-wise, right? But I really think he's going to put up a spectacular passing season. I don't think, since the injury, we haven't seen a version of Dak Prescott who has significant rushing upside, so that's not there. I don't think he's going to finish as the QB1. But I do think he's going to finish as a top 8 fantasy QB.
Yeah, we got bold predictions to close out the show. There's one with the Cowboys you don't want to miss. All right, give me a sleeper here then, Andy. What do you got as a sleeper?
It is going to shock you, absolutely shock you, that I like the Bears quarterback.
Oh, you've earned that right. You've earned that right. Good Lord.
Give me Caleb Williams. And this is as much an indictment of the Bears as it is praise for Caleb Williams, but I think there is a non-trivial chance that Caleb Williams is going to immediately deliver the single greatest quarterback season in Bears history. That is such a low bar. The Bears' single season passing record is just over 3,800 yards. It's scandalously low. Caleb's going to cruise past that. We never see a quarterback who's drafted first overall come into a situation that is this talent rich. We've got Keenan Allen, we got DJ Moore, we got Rome Odunze, we got 2 good tight ends, we got DeAndre Swift, one of the best receiving backs in the league. That right there, you start projecting those players, you can give them conservative projections, you're still going to come up with 4,200 passing yards for Caleb. Also, while he's not like a proactive runner, he's an opportunistic runner, and he's a really clever player. So I think we're going to get 6 rushing touchdowns out of him. I think he's in for a huge year.
It'll be delightful either way. It'll be fun to watch you react, win or lose. Tara, what do you got for us on?
My sleeper quarterback is weird. I don't know. Is it cheating to call a guy that has finished as a top 5 quarterback over and over and over again a sleeper quarterback? Maybe if it was 5 years ago. Deshaun Watson is my sleeper quarterback. He's not the Deshaun Watson of
That's
old.
bold.
Yeah,
That's bold, yeah.
It is
So,
bold.
yeah. This is bold.
It
Go
is
ahead.
bold. Let me talk you through it. He is not I don't think we're getting top 5 out of him. I mean, things would have to dramatically turn around. I don't know if he has that upside anymore. But man, last year in the limited action that he did play, the results were, while it wasn't beautiful from a real game perspective, it was perfectly fine from a fantasy perspective. He had QB 5 finishes, QB 8, QB 10, QB 14, just one bad QB 27. Health is a concern, but if he is on the field in that offense with his rushing upside, yeah, he's going to put up a very ugly QB1 performance. It's going to be ugly. I'm not going to lie, but from a fantasy perspective, it will work.
I just think by the middle of the year, the Browns fans are going to be wishing they still have Flacco. You should be wishing that you're doing the best version of the Yahoo Sports app, fantasy app. If you haven't seen it yet, where you've been, the fantasy app has a bold new look. So we've got all sorts of great redesigns out there with easy-to-use features, seamless navigation, helps you set your winning lineup every single week. Plus, there's more content from these great experts, everybody getting you ready for everything you need to know every single week. Download the redesigned Yahoo Fantasy app or update your current app and go ahead and get out there and do it today. It looks awesome. By the way, shout out, I did it last night with my buddy JC Chazet from InSync, humble brag. Yeah. He told me that he drafted with his team and the Yahoo Sports app gave him a D-. So I'm sorry, JC.
Can I just say Matt Harmon gives all those grades personally?
Yeah, okay. So I'll connect JC and Matt because he was none too pleased. All right. So as we wrap everything up, I said this a minute ago. Let's get some bold predictions. We're gonna put ourselves out there. We're gonna let the world know what one thing that we think is absolutely gonna be incredible. And we'll start here with Tara. What do you got for us, Tara?
Oh, did you have to start with me? My bold prediction, it's bold. It is Deontay Johnson returns to a top 12 wide receiver. It's been a while since we've seen it, and the circumstances have been very understandable. And him going into this Carolina offense, it's interesting because we've got a situation where, again, am I saying that Carolina is going to be a fantastic team? No. But I love how Deontay Johnson fits into this offense. Going out and getting him was literally the perfect move for them to provide the perfect wide receiver for Bryce Young. I think that Deontay is going to be heavily targeted. We'll see him get back to his bread and butter, being one of the guys up at the very top of the league in targets, making the most out of it, getting some touchdowns here or there, but the volume in PPR is what we're looking for him. So yeah, PPR, top 12, return, Deontay Johnson.
Not a lot of Cardinals and Panthers loving the show. I'm stunned. All right, Andy, give us your bold prediction. Oh, actually, no. Forget that. I almost said a bad word. I get to give us the bold prediction.
Good restraint.
All right, thank you very much. All right, you mentioned Dak earlier. I'm just going to lay it out for you. The Cowboys are going to have the stars of fantasy football this year, and I'm talking about Dak and I'm talking about CD. And every time you sit there and you say, yeah, but what about the contracts? I will remind you that the very people that sit on air every day telling you that contract disputes are going to be a distraction are currently in contract disputes and still do their job. One of the dumbest things that we do in football is we apply contract value to some sort of conversation that's going to happen on a real Sunday. When Washington is playing Dallas, CD is not going to be sitting there saying, but I haven't gotten paid yet. He's going to get paid. Dak is going to go out and keep a real eye on what the Cowboys did this offseason. They didn't address Tony Pollard. They basically said, we're good giving up that 61 yards a game, 4 yards a carry. We don't care. So how are the Cowboys going to win this year? The Cowboys are going to win by rolling the ball out to Dak and saying, go out there and be an MVP candidate. I think by the end of this year, Dak Prescott's going to be the MVP of the NFL. He's going to put up massive numbers. CeeDee Lamb's going to have huge numbers. The Cowboys are still going to win 12 games. They're still going to lose in the playoffs. But you're talking about the fantasy. You don't need to worry about that right now. So I got the Cowboys. Now, Andy, we saved the best for last. We saved the ultimate closer here. Come in and finish the show for us.
Yeah, I'm gonna tie together a couple of things that we've already talked about, and I'm gonna say that 2 rookie quarterbacks are going to finish in the top 10 fantasy-wise at the position. I'm not sure that people realize how rare that is. Like, that is not a thing that generally happens. Usually the first season for any quarterback is a bit of a struggle. I get 2012 vibes out of this class, and that, of course, the year that RG3, Andrew Luck, Russell Wilson all debut, and they are all immediately fantasy relevant, some of them absolute stars. I think we're getting that out of Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams. Daniels is going to have to stay healthy. He's going to have to steer clear of, the once-a-game college experience where he just absolutely got rocked. Like, that can't happen so much in the NFL, but man, Williams is in a talent-rich situation. Daniels is in a talent-rich situation. If they just make it to 15 games, they're going to be stars.
All right, here's what I know. We're incredibly proud of what we're doing here at Yahoo Sports and Yahoo Fantasy, and our ability to talk to you guys about fantasy football every day is something that we are incredibly honored that you give the time every season to do this. If you haven't signed up, go sign up in the app. Never too late. Remember, there's $1 million out there that you can be a part of winning, but we don't even have jobs if you guys don't choose to follow us and follow our shows. We genuinely appreciate all the time that you've spent with us now. Wish you all luck throughout the course of the draft. We will be with you all year, yelling and screaming just like you will. I will be talking trash to him all year. That's one thing I can promise. But I can also promise you we're honored that you give us the time, as you always do. This is going to be a great season. We appreciate you hanging out with us. This has been the Yahoo Fantasy Draft Preview Show, sponsored by NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube TV. Thanks for watching.